Hi, everyone. I'm Cheryl Farrell, and welcome to Stories by the Sisterhood of Black Women Over 50. This is where we hear stories from women of a certain age who share their challenges and successes and how hope integrates in their overcoming and their achievements. I work with our storytellers to develop a narrative, and then we pull excerpts for this presentation. So sit back, be inspired, and thank you for joining us. Today's storyteller is my dear friend Alice Sanders from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Alice is a retired human resources officer from a Fortune 500 company, but her passion for diversity and health equity remained constant. During the civil rights era, she endured personal indignities in the workplace that would be cause for civil action today. Yet, with poise as her trademark, she rose to leadership levels, eager to advocate for women and people of color. Alice is a two-time cancer survivor, but her faith has never wavered. She rang the bell to announce hope and second and third chances to live fully. Please join me now in welcoming Alice Sanders. Hi, Alice.
How are you?
I'm good. We've been talking about sharing stories for a while, and we're finally getting to do it. I'm so glad you're here.
I'm glad to be here.
I have a favorite memory of how we met. It was in the year 2000. My family was moving from Los Angeles to Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I had no idea what that was about. And I'll say I reluctantly moved. My husband took a good job there. And I asked our realtor, I said, are there any Black people in Lancaster? And I'm sure there were many, but he gave me your name, and it was friendship from that moment on. Do you recall that time?
I certainly do. And I always say it was God ordained that we should meet. I do recall
Wonderful. I think you had moved to Lancaster like in the late
that. In
80s or so.
1987 from the Detroit area. So we shared a shock factor moving from major cities to the rural agricultural part of Pennsylvania, the Amish country, as it's referred to in
Mhm.
Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
But we brought our sister girl spin to it, and it's been a delight being your friend ever since. So thank you again for being here. So the way we do this interview is I do a lightning round. This is kind of reverse order from my quiz show days, where I give really quick questions and you give me answers. And then from there, we'll move into an excerpt from your story. The first question is, my life calling is.
To be a servant and an advocate for others.
What are three words that describe you?
Alice, the advocate.
Well, that says it, and it's three words. Wonderful. Alice the Advocate. Terrific.
Right.
What would you say is your biggest challenge, has been your biggest challenge?
My biggest challenge has been fighting cancer 3 times. Breast cancer and surviving that for 23 years, only to become afflicted with lung cancer. So just finished the second round of radiation from lung cancer just last year. So that today has been my biggest challenge.
Thank you. And we're so glad that you have persevered and kept your faith during that time. We're now going to move into a segment where you read a section of your story. And there's one section that's entitled Breaking Barriers, and would like you to read that for us now.
After receiving a degree in what's called back then secretarial science from an African American business college, Lewis College of Business. Little did we know that we were being groomed, educated, and positioned to go into the major corporations in the Detroit area as secretaries. I took the secretarial examination at Ford Motor Company's corporate headquarters and had to do it twice because the first time they just merely told us we didn't pass. But as God would have it, in October 1963, I was hired as first secretary in Ford's tractor operation. And while there, I really utilized my excellent skills. We were some of the best students from the business college. Once I got promoted to an executive secretary, much against the desires of the executive for whom I had to work, I really faced a challenge. First of all, he did not want me because of my color. He said that it just wouldn't look professional to have an African American, but at that time they called us Negroes, sitting outside his office should his manager from South Africa come to visit. I took a real challenge towards that and said to the HR manager, this is not South Africa. And if someone with less service than I is granted that position, that I would seek legal action. Now, I had no idea of how to go about this threat, but I got the job. And as I had done many times in the corporation, I softened his heart. Got to meet his wife, his children, even became friends with the younger daughter once she got a position with the company. I only worked for him, however, for 1 year before being promoted and going elsewhere. But it was very challenging fighting that type of discrimination and fighting him every day because he really did not want me there. But then he had to utilize my skills in ways that I'm sure he was regretting. But it turned out to be a win-win for both of us.
Thank you so much for that. I applaud your championing the right thing. You likely made a way for many other people of color after you. Do you feel that that occurred?
Yes, absolutely. Being a pioneer in the 60s was challenging at best. But I am sure that most of the secretarial pool in Ford Motor Company, General Motors, Chrysler, is quite diverse. I haven't visited, but I can comfortably state that.
Wonderful. Well, there's definitely an Alice Sanders legacy for all of them. You
Yes.
mentioned that sometimes employees would come to you to be a voice, to be an advocate for them. While you were in that role, how were you able to help other people in their jobs?
What I always said, use your voice. If someone were having difficulty with an immediate supervisor, sit down with them and say, we have to talk. You might not like me as a person, but we have to work together and we have to find ways to work together. So often, what I found in my role over the years in human resources, employees run to human resources to problem solve for them. You are the employee, you are the subordinate. You learn to speak up and say, there is something we both need to do in order to get the job done. So I did a lot of that, really instilling in people of color and women that you have a voice and you must use your voice for your good.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. The sad thing is that this was maybe during the 60s and 70s,
Yes.
and much of that work is going on now, still has to go on. And you have laid the groundwork, give an example of how we can overcome, how we can thrive, no matter what discrimination or racism there is in the workplace. There's another section called A New Battleground. And I was wondering if you would share insight on what that meant in your life story.
Well, I relocated from the Detroit area to Lancaster, Pennsylvania in 1987. It, after going through that cultural shock, I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 1993. Went through a series of biopsies and testing, only to make the decision to have a mastectomy at that time. Did all of the treatments, even went into the Philadelphia area to seek the best care for myself. I needed to get some of the stress off of my body that corporate America was imposing. So I retired in 1995, 2 years after being diagnosed. But before I retired, I was blessed with the opportunity to meet the organizers of the Pennsylvania Breast Cancer Coalition, a group of wonderful and dynamic people that I still work with today. They were fighting for a cure for breast cancer, and I like that. So that kind of, you could say, misfortune turned into a blessing. I have been a face for African American women and other women of color who have been diagnosed with this disease. And I've touched lots of lives as a result of being a breast cancer survivor. I'm a fighter. I encourage other women who go through the challenges of cancer that you can have a life and live a life with cancer. We know there's no cure yet, but life can go on. So that's my new battleground.
Wow, thank you so much, Alice. It's amazing how I mentioned earlier this poise and dignity and being resolute in pursuing your way through. So thank you for being the model for other women. Is there advice, men and women, but primarily women in the case of breast cancer? What are your findings about women of color, minorities in cancer? What has come to mind what comes to mind when you offer advice and information about that?
I'm glad you asked that because I have been fortunate to work with one of our major health providers targeting women of color, especially women of color in the low economic environment. And it's access to health care, it's poor diet, it's fear, and for a lot of African Americans, it's faith, meaning if God wants me to live with this, he'll let me. If he wants me to die, I guess I should change that to religion and belief. So
Mm-hmm.
we've had to work hard, first of all, to get them to go and get a mammogram. Secondly, to understand the importance of healthy diets. You know, they live in food deserts, a lot of people of color, people of low income, and they think they cannot afford to eat properly, but we teach them. We go shopping with them. So that has just been so rewarding to educate and advocate for people who don't know how to use their voice.
I often say that it's one thing to overcome something or be blessed with something and say, aren't I fortunate? Aren't I lucky? But it's quite another thing to take your blessing and reach back and help others. That it is about being a light for others, showing another possibility, another way to live and to live fully. These have been two amazing excerpts from your story. I'd like to round it out with a few final questions, a few final thoughts. What is a dream that you're working on?
Right now, with all of the things that have been going on with the pandemic, with the protests, I'm just being still. My prayer to God is I will be still and I know you will speak to me. I don't know what the next step is going to look like, but I know it's going to be God ordained. So that's where my dreams are right now.
I think that is a viable dream. Dream is a verb, being still is a verb, and following God's direction has served you very well. So we look forward to hearing what comes from that stillness.
Yes, I do too.
I wonder if you would share with us a favorite quote of yours.
One of my favorite quotes, and since I think a lot of people will be women that will follow um, your storyline, comes from the book of Esther. And it says, for if you remain silent, and who knows, but that you will come into a position for such a time as this. And I think with everything that's going on, there is something that each of us can do to be a blessing to someone else.
That is great. I think that's a great inspiration to young people, as you say, that know that there is a place and a purpose for us all. Thank you for being this amazing, I keep using the word amazing, but it's not empty words. This idea of having the determination, the poise, the character, the integrity to go through so many challenges and still smiling. And you are an inspiration to me. And I talk about hope that never grows old in this series, and you are an outstanding example of that message. So I'll leave the floor to any one last comment you'd want to make to our young people or other women of a certain age.
Well, especially to our young people, because they stand on our shoulders, and I want them to keep hope alive, your now hope, and get out there and vote and believe that a change is going to come. We don't know what that's going to look like, but we want them to look for hope, listen to the wounds of racism, unemployment, poverty, discrimination, and health disparities. Keep hope alive.
Thank you so much, Alice, for this inspiring interview. I know I've known you for decades, but I feel like I'm meeting you all again, meeting you anew, finding where your heart is and making a difference for women, women of color, and for our young people. Thank you.
And thank you.
So that's our episode for today. Thank you so much for being with us as we spoke with Alice Sanders. Please keep telling your story. Your story matters. If you want information about our storytelling series, please visit the website at the bottom of this video. Until then, happy storytelling and happy life. Bye-bye. Okay, that's it.